Welcome to Three Questions to Better Business. I'm excited about today's call because it ties into a subject which I've known about kind of on the fringes for a while. I've worked out my entire adult life. And a few years ago, I was visiting a client and I noticed when I went around to all the offices, everybody was standing at a standing desk. And I thought I knew why. And I talked to them. They said, "Oh, yeah. We've had some experts in here and they told us we should be standing because sitting's not good for you," which I kind of knew. And so I went out and invested in a standing desk, and I've been standing when I worked for the last 3 years. And it was perfect when COVID hit because I was used to standing in front of a camera. And then last year, I was introduced to today's guest interviewee, Dr. Stefan Zavalin. Stefan, his entire focus is on helping people increase and improve their health through standing, or actually sitting less. So with that, Stefan, welcome. Very happy to have you on today.
I'm excited. I love hearing that story as well. You might have told it to me before, but I love hearing those tidbits that reinforce what I'm doing because more and more I see how truly vital it is to the future of desk work.
Yeah, and when we met, it tied right in. I might not have shared that with you, but it's like, I need to talk to you on here because our viewers, if you're watching this recording especially, this is a critical habit you have to develop. And I'm saying that as a non-physician, even though my initials are MD, I only play one on TV. We've got the expert here. And now, Stefan, just a little bit of background. I know you've done a TED Talk, and specifically, what is your doctorate in?
So I have a doctorate in physical therapy. It is not
Yeah.
a PhD for people to understand the differences. There are clinical doctorates. That's the MDs, in this case, the DPT, the Doctorate of Physical Therapy. And then there's your PhDs, which those are more along the lines of you do research. There is a PhD in physical therapy where you can do research for physical therapists. Mine is the clinical doctorate of where I'm actually working with patients and all of that. Though I have gotten that, I've now gotten out of practicing with patients individually just because the impact needs to be much greater.
Gotcha. I still think I did it the easier way. Just get an MD, be born with those initials. But anyway, we're not here to talk about that. What is it that got you involved in talking about sitting less?
So I've been into movement my entire life to a degree. I had a little slump right around middle to high school to junior high, where I got way into orchestra, not in a bad way, in a really good way. But I realized it's not fun anymore to do gym and all of that. So it went away for a while, but inevitably it found its way back in. And I got a degree in kinesiology as my bachelor's, which is effectively exercise science. And by the end of that, my parents were saying, we want a grad school. And I went, I have no idea what I'm going to do for a grad school. I just know I like moving. I started a CrossFit club at my university. And I knew that I enjoyed helping people move and move better. And that's when I found physical therapy. Didn't even know that it kind of existed. Went to physical therapy school, thought it was amazing, thought it was wonderful. There's a much longer story there just because I ended up losing my vision as part of going to physical therapy school. But got into the clinic finally and realized this is good, but this is not actually solving the issues. Because people would come in, I would give them exercises, do the hands-on treatments. Great, they feel better. A year later, same issue. And sure, part of that is because they didn't do the exercises, but I gave myself a prescription of exercises that I didn't follow for physical therapy. So even us, we can be very much fallible in that sense. So I realized that the change needed to happen more so where we were working and how we were working, because so many of my patients were having issues because of how their desk was set up, that they were just sitting too long, because ergonomics is a tiny portion of it. The other part is the habits. Mm-hmm. And so as I got more and more into it and I started talking to more and more people, everybody who goes, yeah, I know. Yeah, I need to go to the gym. I need to exercise more. I get it. I understand. And there yet again, I found the issue that so many people think that it's about moving more and standing more, exercising more. And we get so burnt out when we think about all the things we have to be doing more of. And that's where I made that shift of saying we need to sit less, which is an entirely different shift of mind and a mindset change to reduce the bad stuff you're doing. Don't just try to increase all the good stuff that you're doing. And that's what really made that evolution to where I wrote the book it's up there, called Sit Less. And then the TED Talk, which is titled Move More, Sit Less, talking about that sort of difference. But that's the journey. Yeah.
Absolutely love that. Now let's roll it back.
Mm-hmm.
How did you lose your vision or partial vision due to physical therapy?
Yeah. So it's interesting because everybody always goes, oh, it was probably something exotic, but I actually got a parasite. I got a parasite in my eye. To be very clear and transparent with the entire journey, from birth, one eye, not good at all, nerve damage, glasses are not going to fix it. So the other eye, I always identified as my good eye, which is very interesting as the story continues. Developed this pain, got misdiagnosed for months where they were saying, oh, it's this or that, until I finally got the diagnosis of it being a parasite, which I got in Philadelphia tap water. That doesn't mean don't go to Philadelphia. Philadelphia is a great place.
Just don't drink the water.
It just so happened that the water got into my eye, into a cut that then got covered by contact lens.
Wow.
It was just a series of things that had to go wrong or right, depending on how you view it that way. So don't be terrified of Philadelphia water. That's not the point. The bigger point was really that I got misdiagnosed for such a long time. Sure. That it got to the point where it was an issue. And then I had to kind of step away from grad school for a while while they had to do all the repeated surgeries. And then I basically had to put diluted bleach into my eye for a while. It was a nightmare, to say the very least. Like I would just get up and walk around the Philadelphia winter just to feel some cold on my face at 3 a.m. And it was interesting because movement was a consistent thing that I used to get through a lot of that struggle and a lot of that pain. Luckily, the vision came back. I went back to school and I finished off the majority of the academic year. And then right when I was finishing up one of my most important clinicals, it was one of the last days, something again went wrong. And at that point, it went wrong to the point where it was nerve damage to the good eye. And that's when it just kept on going completely downhill. Now that we finally get to this point where I am legally blind, I cannot drive, glasses aren't going to fix it. It's all nerve damage. And so even starting this business, getting out of the clinic and all of that was on this basis and on the grounds of I am blind. I'm going to have to do things differently. So everybody's a beautiful blur to me. I can still see movements to some degrees. I can still see colors. And it has its challenges, but it also has its silver linings, which people are always a little bit surprised to hear. The one I like sharing is for your especially listeners, the TEDx talk silver lining. I can't stand there and read a script. Right. I can't see it. You have to memorize a script for a TEDx talk. Many of the speakers I was with didn't have their stuff memorized a week out even from the actual talk. They would stand there with their papers, try to look at it and go, oh no, because they had that crutch to fall back on. I didn't have that choice. My script was well memorized over a month and a half before it, just because I had to. And then I was just rehearsing and rehearsing and rehearsing. As a result, the actual talk itself, way better than so many of the others, because I got to practice some of the other tiny nuances as opposed to just memorize script. And I was forced into it because of my vision, but other people out there can choose to have that kind of preparation.
Well, I worked with a Supreme Court justice from Michigan at the 2016 Cincinnati TEDx, first blind Supreme Court justice in the state of Michigan. He told me through that when we were working together, Stefan, he told me as a justice, he has to memorize both sides of every case that he hears because he can't refer to notes. When people are giving oral arguments in front of him, he has to know every detail of both cases. So it forces you, right, to go and study and know these things so well that you don't have to think about them. You've got to pivot, right, when you're in a situation. So. For
sure. I bet his short-term memory is fantastic. That's one of the things that I generally have prided myself on good short-term memory, but now I feel that I hold on to information a lot faster and easier and manipulate it just because I have to. I can't refer to notes as easily.
Yeah. Your memory and your other four senses, I'm sure, just on a heightened state most of the time. And you are inspirational in many ways. And one is you've written a book, even though you are legally blind. None of us has an excuse. If we say, oh, I'm going to write a book, get the book written. All right. Now, as a storytelling trainer and coach, I couldn't let that comment you dropped in about being blind in physical therapy go. We had to hear that story.
Absolutely.
But we're here today to talk about, go ahead.
Well, and what I will say about the book is because people go, well, he probably dictated it out. I didn't. I found that to be actually not very useful. I just pushed through and I just did the work. And so can you. You don't have those impairments. You can just sit down and do the work. That's all it really takes.
That's it. I'm going through it right now with my second one, and the editor's been brilliant. She tells me everything I did that needs to be better. But you've got to have a good editor, but it's got to be your words. All right, let's talk about why we're really here today and why is sitting so bad for us?
Sure. So I like presenting this on more of a timeline because most people know that sitting is bad. They may not recognize how much sitting is bad, but most people you ask, you go, do you think sitting too much is bad for you? They'll go, oh, yeah, of course. And I think many of us have felt the aches and pains or the stiffness that might have resulted from it. But what is it actually doing to your body if we're talking about long term? For years and years, day in, day out, as you're sitting at your desk. The reason I like to present it on a timeline, I like to talk about how many hours a day, what effect that has on you. So then you can know, okay, this is probably where I'm about on this line and how much do I need to adjust. So at around 4 hours of sitting a day, you've got some increase in blood pressure, increase in the fat in the bloodstream and insulin levels. It sounds scary. Most of that you can get away with if you do movement throughout the day. Great. Not even exercise, just general movement. 6 hours, you've got increased risk of anxiety and depression. Again, if you're getting good enough exercise, that pretty much goes away. 8 hours doubles the risk of cardiovascular disease. This one is really important, especially for us in the States. In the United States, cardiovascular disease, #1 killer, even during the pandemic. And this doubles the risk of it for sitting 8 hours or more. Up to that point, if you have adequate amounts of exercise and movement throughout your day, it reverses all of that. And adequate, by the way, is 150 minutes per week. So half an hour, 5 times a week. You can have the weekends off if you really want to. And that can just be walking around. It can be activities. It doesn't have to be half an hour straight. So you've got that. The final tidbit of the timeline, this is what really pushed me out of the clinic and made me go, we need to change this. 11 or more hours a day of sitting increases the risk of premature death by 40%.
Wow.
Unfortunately, that's not the bad news. That's impactful already. 40% is a big number. It didn't seem to reduce in those studies with exercise. So those individuals that exercised but still sat more than 11 hours still had that increased risk. So us thinking that if we sit 13 hours a day, and depending on, there's different averages for US desk workers and computer workers, anywhere from 12 to 15 hours a day that they're sitting. If you're sitting 13 hours a day and you think an hour at the gym is going to completely reverse everything and improve your health, it's not going to do you harm, but it's not taking away everything that we needed to take away. And it's not as if you're going to start exercising 3 hours a day, because if you're struggling to exercise an hour 3 times a week, you're not going to add 3 hours every day. And so the option then is, there really only is one: reduce how much you're sitting. And that's been the message of so much of what I talk about.
Okay. And I'm all about, in life, habits. It's all about habits. So how can we start to sit less?
Sure. The biggest thing, I always like to give 2 things you can do right away. So the first one is you have to start breaking up the sitting time into smaller chunks. The most ideal 20 to 30 minutes that you're sitting, do not start there. You're going to interrupt your workflow. You're going to feel like you have no idea what you're doing. If you're somebody who usually sits an hour, hour and a half, start at the hour mark, 45-minute mark, maybe even hour and 15-minute mark. But that way you have something that you're basing the habit off of, and it's a lot easier for you to accomplish. So that's the first part, is break up your sitting. You don't have to do exercises. You can get a glass of water. You can get more coffee, go to the bathroom, whatever it might be. Just move. Just don't sit. Those little breaks don't reduce the amount you're sitting, the total duration, a whole lot. So then the other piece is, We have to reduce the tasks that you're doing in sitting. Now, you still have to do your work and you still have to be as productive as possible. So what are the things that you can do at work that could be done in standing or walking instead of sitting? Certain meetings are great examples. Presentations are even better examples because you have better energy when you're presenting and standing.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And
You're not going to get any argument from me on that one.
So, and that's the piece that you're going to have the biggest impact. It doesn't have to be huge. You don't have to start by cutting out 4 hours of sitting right away. Start with, okay, do I answer my emails maybe at my kitchen counter? Maybe I put my laptop on a pile of books. You said you have a standing desk. I get a lot of arguments, people going, I can't afford a standing desk. I have sat down for 2 Zoom calls over the last year. I don't have a standing desk. And by the way, the 2 that I sat down for, I partially tore my calf because I was training for a half marathon, and that was the reason I sat down. You don't have to buy fancy equipment. There are ways that you can absolutely adapt it. So those are the 2 main things. Break up the sitting with little breaks of whatever else it is that you might be doing, and then adapt your current work, just parts of it. Because even if you do a couple of things in standing throughout the day, that's already contributing to the breaking up the sitting part. And that's how we start to evolve it.
So we start by breaking it up first. Is there a good target for how many hours we should be standing or just moving around?
Sure. So the ideal, I'm going to almost answer it in a reverse kind of way. Okay. The ideal is if you can get to 8 or less hours of sitting. So that would be probably, if you're sleeping for 8 hours, that would be 8 hours of standing. That is the absolute ideal. We have to recognize that we did not get to this point in a couple months or in a couple years. We got to this point of sitting for 13, 14, 15 hours over decades. Even if you think back all the way to school, in school, we're forced to sit. And a lot of times kids are told you can't fidget, don't disrupt the class. You're just sitting the entire time. When I looked back after grad school, I thought I've been taught to sit for 20 years now. You're not going to unlearn this immediately in a month, in 2 months. If you really want to get down to 8 or less hours of sitting, it's going to take 1 to 2 years. Be honest with yourself. You don't have to start and just completely chop up your entire workday. Start slow and then progress from there. But yeah, it's around 8 hours is ideal.
Well, I was reading something yesterday, Stefan, that talked about walking, just developing the habit of walking. All right, start by walking to your mailbox this week. Next week, make it the corner and just keep stretching it to where one day you're running a marathon. Same idea here, right? Get up, just start getting in the habit of maybe setting an alarm every hour. I'm going to get up, I'm going to walk somewhere in my house or my office. And then next week,
very similar idea. The one thing that I will say is that, this is a perfect example, by the way, is the idea of moving more, which works. There is an amount to it. But eventually, if you think in my workday, I have time for a 5 to 10 minute walk. If you try to make it a marathon, you probably don't have time in every single day for a marathon and to have that much time away from work. Which is usually where, and people try to do that, and then they inevitably hit this block of, I can't scale it. It doesn't scale to further. Versus where we're still doing the work, but we're reducing the sitting time, you can almost infinitely scale it. And I'm not saying you should go to 0 hours of sitting. There's some tasks that you have to do sitting. It just makes more sense to sit for certain things. That's okay, but you can almost infinitely reduce it until finally you're not really doing anything truly detrimental to your health by sitting that amount of time. So it's on the right track of you start very small and progress from there. Maybe it's standing for 5 minutes of a Zoom meeting, and then by the end of 2 or 3 months, you're standing for the whole hour. But it's not necessarily about let's do more exercise kind of a thing.
Gotcha. Yeah, I know I have to sit for part of the day because my bosses, my chihuahuas, insist on sitting on my lap sometime throughout the days. They're in charge, so I have to do that. But I have noticed that at a certain point, they get uncomfortable because I fidget. So it's like, that's my signal. All right, go back upstairs, girls. You've had your time with dad. 2 quick questions and I'll let you go. One is, if we are sitting, are there some exercises we can do while sitting that would help this problem?
Sure. A lot of people will get into, first of all, fidgeting, fantastic thing to do. If your culture, and this is a lot what I try to work with people as well, is what is their outlook on the words that they're using and the culture in the workplace? Meaning, do we usually tend to say, everybody sit down so we can get started? Stop standing around and get back to work. If those are the words you're using, you have a culture that's saying sitting is good, standing is bad, and we need to change that. So fidgeting can be a great way for you to actually move, even though you have to be sitting for that amount of time. Any amount of exercises, any amount of movement is going to be better than nothing. But everything you can do in sitting is really not as great as if you just stand up, because the bigger muscles in your legs are not really going to be used. Sure, you can do some marching, you can put a little bicycle under your desk, all things that are better than just sitting there. But standing up and moving around while in standing, it just uses so much more of your body and your muscles. Yeah.
And the other, this last point is a point, not a question. Because when the pandemic hit, I was used to standing when I did some coaching, and then I started hosting and presenting at half day and full day workshops. That got painful. So I went, and my best investment during the pandemic was $100 into a standing pad. And it's ergonomically, it's got little ridges in it. It's got bumps on the side, and I can fidget all around. And I do. I'm a fidgeter anyway, but I can constantly move my feet. I had no hip, back, or knee problems after I invested in this. Best $100 I spent in the last 2.5 years.
You make a great point in that sense of people go, yeah, standing. I've stood all my life. I know how to do it. That's exactly my point around the fact that it might take 1 to 2 years for you to develop it, because we're actually not used. Our muscles aren't used for us standing for such a long period of time. Back pain, knee pain, hip pain, it's going to come in. So yeah, I'm glad that you invested in it, because it's allowing you to move. Because in the end, that's really what our body wants to do.
Yeah, absolutely. And I've even got a chair that you can never see when I'm on camera that I stick one of my feet up on, and I'm stretching. Even when I'm talking to folks, it's not a distraction. But I've reached that age, 20th anniversary of being 39, that I have to do that. And I became, I don't know, 5-6 years ago, I got this idea to start my day with like 5 minutes of yoga stretching. Mm-hmm. And in the last few months, Stefan, I've become obsessed with doing yoga every day for at least 30 to 40 minutes. And it's not just because I want to be a yogi. It has made a huge difference in how I feel physically, taking a lot of pressure off, because no matter how much we do with age, you know this as a physiologist, yeah, there's some issues you got to deal with, but it's constant movement. So look, I know you're busy. You just moved. I thank you for coming on today. And I know we had to reschedule a couple of times because of my crazy schedule. So thank you for being patient. This has been incredibly valuable. In fact, one of my friends and one of my clients just posted, he's a RN. He says, great information to add into my own practice. He's done some speeches I've helped him with on Move. So, Steve, I'm glad you were able to be here today and hear Stefan. In fact, I'll connect you two guys through email. Wouldn't hurt to know each other, because you both are movement cheerleaders. Let's put it that way. All right. As we close out, Stefan, because you are so good at helping people get better physically, and I know physical also has a cascading effect to help us mentally and emotionally, you are the recipient that not very many people get to receive. But by being on this show, you're the recipient of what is called the Golden Shovel Award. And I will send this to you in an email form. Not everybody gets to put this on their wall. I'm just saying it's a very prestigious award.
More wall space. I'm excited
for your new place. I'll get that out to you. Now, just so people know, and if my screen would cooperate, I want to let them know how they can reach you. And for some reason, my screen doesn't want to cooperate. There we go. I've got on the screen your email address, stefan.zavalin@ltmmtl.com and www.stefanzavalin.com. Stefan, thank you so much for being with us today. This is such an important topic. I knew that's why I wanted to talk with you and share this with my friends and any followers. Any final thoughts before we go?
First of all, I appreciate you having me. My biggest thing, again, is to reiterate that difference between the moving more and sitting less. It can apply to very many things in your life, not just movement. And finally, thank you for standing up for this one. Not everybody stands up for these things with me, so I appreciate it.
I don't know any other way to do it. So thank you for coming on. Good luck in the new place. I know it's anytime you have a move, it's a transition, but you've got plenty of room to stand. I can tell.
Mm.
So, and we will talk soon.